First and foremost, I want to thank you so much for coming on my platform. I really appreciate you taking out the time to stop by, and I'm very interested to hear more about the work that you have done.
You bet. It's my pleasure.
Likewise, likewise. For the viewers who may not recognize you, could you let them know who you are, where you're from, and what do you do?
So, I am James Kaufman. I'm a professor of educational psychology at the University of Connecticut, and I study creativity.
Wow. Okay. Okay. That sounds very interesting. I can ask you, when did you develop this passion for, I guess, psychology?
So, I always wanted to be a creative writer and was debating doing that, but decided to do something that felt a little more practical and get a PhD in psychology. And around my third year, I thought, well, if you're fascinated by creative writing, what would happen if you studied it? And I began reading everything I could about creativity and creative writing. And I just fell in love with the field and fell in love with the idea of how can you help people be more creative? What kinds of people are creative? And I've been working on it ever since.
Wow. Okay. That's really cool. Now, I wanted to ask you about one of your projects, Discovering Magenta. Now, to my understanding, it's a psychological musical and book. What inspired you to write that? And what was the process like for that?
Absolutely. I actually wrote that my last year of college and my first year of graduate school. I had worked at a mental hospital for 2 summers because I was trying to figure out what aspect of psychology interested me, and clinical psychology, or helping people who may have mental health struggles, is a very it's a very popular type of psychology. And it was my experience working there that led me to write this musical about a young mental health worker who gets very, very involved with a young woman named Katrina. And she's in this kind of catatonic state. And he helps her and they become friends. And within his circle of friends, they work to kind of uncover this mystery, the trauma in her past. And the composer was Michael Bitterman, and maybe uh, just under 10 years ago, it had its New York City premiere, which was a lot of fun. I hadn't written creatively in that style for a very long time. So it was fun revisiting that, getting back into theater, which has always been one of my loves. And it actually kind of helped inspire a lot of the work I've been doing more in creativity in theater since. So that was so much fun.
Oh, okay, okay. Now I can ask you this. As interesting as it all sounds, have you thought about going from theater to maybe film or television or even doing a documentary?
I've done a couple of documentaries as um, one of the talking heads. I was also the kind of on camera narrator for a wonderful documentary called Independence, which was written and directed by Chris Brandt about comic book artists, where I was the scientist studying creativity who kept popping up with creativity tips while he was talking to some of the leading comic book artists. I actually just filmed a television show in Spain when I was there that was a science show. And this episode was about creativity called The Brain Hunters. Um, I have actually thought quite a bit about doing other documentary work like that. And for a while, I was working with some folks in LA. It's just so hard to get stuff off the ground. But um, I always enjoy doing anything for TV and film. It's fun.
Okay, okay. Now I meant to ask you about that. How was your visit to Spain? And I can ask you this: is the conversation about mental health as I guess popular as it is in America? Is it talked about as much?
Um, so I was actually in Spain. We didn't go into mental health as much. It was more of a creativity conference. A lot of the, but what a lot actually, what a lot of the discussion was on creativity, arts, and emotion, which is related, but as opposed to mental health from a possibly more perspective of struggles with mental health, it was about how creativity and the arts can help mental health. And there's been some marvelous work on this about how engaging in creative activities can help you. It's called emotional regulation, where maybe you get very highly aroused. So that would be anger or anxiety, and you need a way to calm down. Or maybe you are less aroused in the sense, emotionally aroused, and you might be depressed or sad, and creativity might serve as something that can lift you up. But there have been a number of studies where drawing, writing, singing have done everything from help people reach emotional equilibrium, so stop being sad, stop being angry, but also help them revisit past trauma and be able to better cope with this. So it's really quite remarkable.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. Yeah, it seems like creativity can definitely help people get through some tough times.
And
All
what's
right.
what's
Okay, I
great,
wanted to ask you about some more of your books, The Creativity Advantage. If you could talk about that a little bit.
absolutely, that was one of my favorite books to write, where it is all about the different types of benefits that being creative has. It's it's funny because it's not something that people who study creativity tend to focus on. We tend to focus on how can we help people be more creative, which is, very, very important. But usually if you study creativity, you already think it's important. And nobody will say, oh, who cares about creativity? People tend to say positive things. But if you look at what people kind of secretly believe, a lot of people are less inclined to be favorable towards creative students or creative workers or creative people in general. And so a lot of my focus has been, what are all the different positive outcomes, where it's easy to get that creative genius will help people. The idea that, we have the internet, we have laptops, we have air conditioning, all of these things, that was a result of creative genius. But it's the kind of everyday creativity that all of us can do that has so many different positive aspects. And this includes the mental health aspect I mentioned. It also includes, there's been a lot of stuff on creativity and equity, and how creativity can help people feel more equitable and less prejudiced against other people. There's also a world of stuff on how creativity can connect people to each other, and it can help people with motivation, drive, purpose, as well as in general meaning in life. And so just digging into all the different research about this, the studies, and how that might help people in their day-to-day life.
Okay, okay. Now I had got a chance to check out a few of your videos. You had discussed a few different topics about creativity. I wanted to ask you about um, anti-creativity bias. What exactly is that?
So if you ask people, like if you were to ask teachers, what do you think of your creative students? They tend to say nice things. But if you look at it where, for example, you describe a creative student, so instead of using the word creative, you say, well, what about a student who has all these different ideas, and they're always trying new things, and they don't think anything's impossible, and they're always having questions? Then the teachers are much more likely to go, well, we don't like those students as much. It's the same way when you ask teachers about creative students, and again, they'll say they like them, but if you ask them to describe creative students, they'll often say things like, well, they're the ones who stay in their seats and follow directions. Um, it's true in businesses too, where if you have people doing an activity and you have people observing them, the people who are more creative are considered to be less likely to be good leaders or candidates for promotion, because people know they should say they like creativity, but creativity can still be associated with things like chaos or out of control or people who maybe don't listen or don't do what they're supposed to do. And if we think about, well, what is creativity? Part of creativity is being task appropriate. So if I ask you to do something and I want it to be creative, you still need to do that thing. Like if you want to be a creative dancer, your dance must still be, broadly speaking, a dance. If you build a bridge and it collapses, that's not fulfilling that task. And I think people don't always realize that somebody just shouting out stuff or doing things that are wild and crazy and all over the place, that's not really what we think of as being creative. That's just being new or being obnoxious.
Okay, okay. Now, I wanted to ask you about another topic. I guess what's the connection with creativity and intelligence?
It's um, it's a good question. There's certainly some of creativity involves thinking, obviously, and a lot of the different creative processes are going to be linked to a certain degree to intelligence, but they're often a little different. So, for example, a lot of intelligence is analytic thinking. It can be often memory tasks, whether it's short term, long term. It can be things like acquired knowledge, but it can also be dealing with new stimuli and being asked questions that make you have to go through everything you've remembered and pull it out at the right moment. And that can overlap with creativity. So, a common creativity task. Do you want me to give you a creativity task right now?
Sure.
Okay. I want, so do you see this pen? I want you to
Yes.
tell me as many different things that you can think of that you might use this pen for. Go.
Oh, okay. To write a song, to write
Mhm.
a play, to write a movie script, to sign a check, to sign an autograph, to draw artwork, to make a card, to make a love letter, to write a poem, to design clothing, to dye something, to color something, do some art, do some doodling, do some homework. I think I ran out right there.
So, what you were great at was what we call fluency. You just boom, 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 all these different ideas, which is fantastic. Um, what you might have done is broken down the components of the pen, for example. So, okay, this one's sealed, but there's a spring inside. So you maybe you could have said, well, you might break it open and use a spring for picking a lock. I don't know, restarting an old laptop. Um, there's also ones. Okay, here's another one. Imagine that tomorrow, all of a sudden, everybody in the world no longer needs to sleep. Think of all the different things that would change. Tell me some of the most unusual ones.
Man, no sleep. Definitely more parties. People staying out later. People maybe working more, doing overtime, trying to make more money. No sleep. Maybe spending more time with family and friends. Having more time to exercise and get in shape and visit places, travel, go to the museum, go take care of some extra housework, do some things that you've been putting off. If you definitely getting that 8 hours of sleep, you can utilize that for something. Spending more time with the family, the kids. I think that's it that I could think of.
Would it change any businesses? Like, how might it change the corporate business landscape?
Wow. I mean, maybe the business hours, if places are typically open from 9 to 5, they'll be open all day. Maybe they'll have more staff in the evenings and the nights, the third shift, second shift. You see more people downtown going in and out of offices and buildings and places that's normally closed, maybe like the bank or something like that. People going to the bank late, I believe so, if it's, no need to sleep, no need to rest.
Very good. This is the kind of thing where you're both using intelligence and creativity, because you're using the ability to access, memories. So, well, what are the things people do? What are the things you might do with extra time? All this stuff. That's intelligence, the ability to pull it out when you need it, and the ability to then kind of expand. Okay, well, we got this, but what about this, this, this? That's starting to get into the creativity. And it's a fun little thing. Like, I don't think that's the best way to measure creativity, but it's quick, it's easy, and it engages people.
Yeah, definitely, because it's amazing how fast your mind is kind of composing these ideas. We was only I was only talking for maybe 10 seconds, but that quick, because nobody never asked me that before, so I couldn't possibly be prepared. Like, this is what I'm going to say. So I'm thinking as quick as I can.
And that's another aspect of the creativity versus intelligence. Like, if I said to you, tell me different kinds of flowers, that's getting closer to intelligence, because either you know flowers or you don't. But uses for a pen, or if you didn't need sleep, right? There's no way that you'd be inherently thinking of, hey, what would happen if we didn't need sleep? So you have to do this on the ball, thinking, improvising, all this stuff.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, I wanted to ask you about one more clip I saw. Now, is there a connection between creativity and mental illness?
It's a complicated topic. There are a lot of studies about it. A lot of them aren't great, to be honest. Some of them look at what we call big C, or creative genius, and a lot of them find connections, but a lot of them involve going through biographies of great creators. And it's a flawed way of doing it. I mean, it can be done well, but a lot of the people who've done it, for example, if you go through a bunch of biographies of people and you say whether or not you think they had mental illness, and you take that in percentage, and then you say, well, in all of the country, only 2% have this type of illness. You're comparing things that can't be compared, as well as people who've had lives that have struggles are more likely to have people write biographies about them because it's more interesting. So there are enough studies about geniuses. I think there's something there. But if you talk about everyday people, it's all scatter. In other words, there are a few studies that show connections. There's a lot of studies that show nothing. And there's other studies that show that it's good for mental health. So at the level of you, me, and all sorts of people, I do not believe there is any type of broad connection. The other important thing is there's this saying in psychology, correlation doesn't mean causation. So in other words, things can be related, but it doesn't mean that one causes the other. So for example, crime and ice cream sales are sometimes related. But crime doesn't cause ice cream to be bought, and ice cream doesn't cause people to commit crime. It's that when it's really, really hot out, people want to get ice cream and they're more likely to leave their windows open. So there might be a break in. And it's that kind of a thing where like people often turn to being creative to express themselves, to feel better, to distract themselves, cheer themselves up. And people who perhaps struggle with mental health may turn to creativity, but in such cases, creativity is something that's helpful. It's just these things are related, but they're not causing each other.
Okay, okay. I appreciate you breaking that down. Let me see, we're about 20 minutes in. I wanted to ask you about maybe one or two more books.
Sure.
Okay. Okay. Now you have a book about teaching for creativity in the Common Core classroom. Now, were you an editor on that book, or did you actually write as well?
That one I co-wrote with Ron Beghetto and John Baer. And so some of that is within the Common Core rules, which is just for um, America, but the broad principles in terms of like how can you teach for creativity. I mean, a big one is to not think of creativity as like a school subject. So sometimes it's, oh, let's take creativity time and go do something silly or artistic. It's much better to link it to what you're teaching. So if you're teaching mathematics, and you might not think math is something you could be creative in. I mean, if you go, hey, 2 + 3 is 4, then you're just wrong. But for example, you might have people think of how many different ways could you solve this math problem. So if I give you this algebra problem, 3x + 7 = 14, show me many different ways of solving it, or find your own way of solving this problem. Or here's this mathematical concept. Can you tell me an example of it? So you're having the kids use their creativity with the material. There's also allowing choice. Choice is so big. So often we'll just test kids in one way. So, okay, here's this multiple choice questionnaire. As much as possible to give many different ways that they can show their knowledge is so much better, both for the creative kids to be able to express themselves, but also for everybody to be a little more motivated because they can be showing their knowledge in ways that maybe is a little better matched to their strengths. So maybe you allow some of them to do a standard analytic exercise, but other people maybe can do something a little more creative. One of my favorite English classes in college, we were always given many different options. And, some were standard, others were, write a parody of one of the poems we studied or add a page to one of the novels we read. And you have to really know the material to be able to do this. You have to really understand and know the knowledge, but it also allows you to use a little bit of creativity.
Okay, okay, that's very, very interesting. Let me see. I wanted to ask you about one more creativity 101. Did you speak about that already?
I did not. That was one of my favorites. It's kind of an overview of creativity, and we did 2 editions of that. That's just kind of everything you might want to know about creativity. So some of the stuff I've spoken about, but also things like creativity and motivation, creativity and personality, what types of people are creative. So the personality trait most associated is being open. So wanting to try new things, being willing to consider new ideas, wanting to travel and understand new cultures, eat new foods, maybe try an experience you've never done before. And this is so related to creativity. And it's something that even if you might not instinctively be open to experience, you can still try. Like just find a new way of walking home, or try the next time you're cooking dinner. Just what would happen if I added these two ingredients to my favorite recipe. Another big one with motivation is the idea of intrinsic motivation, so that being interested in a topic, caring about it, is associated with being more creative. And we often think of giving rewards as helping everything. But when you give rewards when somebody already loves to do something, you risk teaching them that the only reason to do it is for that reward. And so if you too often give kids rewards for being creative, they're going to learn the only reason to be creative is so I can get this toy or grade or gold star. And it can actually decrease people wanting to be creative.
Wow, that's a great point. That's a great point. So yeah, we're about 27 minutes in. I guess my last question is, are you working on any projects or books or anything else currently, or do you have anything coming up in the future?
Oh, a whole bunch of stuff. One of the things that have gotten very interested is the idea of legacy, where, you know, many of us are afraid of dying, but we can't really fix that. Like, we can't suddenly become immortal. So there's this idea of symbolic immortality, and the idea that part of us will live on. And there's many ways this can happen. So, I mean, having kids, um, turning to religion, spirituality, turning to nature and the planet. Another one, of course, is creativity. And it's not just, oh, I want to be William Shakespeare and have my creative works be known in 300 years from now. It can be small stuff like, um, my grandma enjoyed painting, and she wasn't amazing, but she was good. It was pretty. And I mean, she died almost 25 years ago, but her paintings are still in my house, and my kids see them every day, as do I. So it's these little ways. Like, if you think about your friends, your family, everything from recipes, scrapbooks, stories, all these things are little ways that we can live on. And it's one of those many things I love about creativity, that it connects us to other people, both right now and in the future. Another thing I'm looking at is creativity and equity, where if you look at a lot of the traits that creative people have, it's associated with things like being tolerant, not prejudiced, not stereotyping. And a lot of the interventions we use for helping people be more tolerant are very similar to exercises to help people be more creative. So I'm also doing a lot of research of trying just to tap into different aspects of creativity to help things like fairness and equity and things like that. So those are two of the things that are really exciting to me, and I'm looking forward to keeping on working on.
Okay, wow, that's really amazing. I'm still processing a lot of the information that you shared. I want to thank you
There
so
are.
much again for the work that you have done and the work that you will continue to do, and taking out the time to stop by. Now, if the viewers want to check out, the projects that you have, is there a website, or should they just Google it, or what's the best place for them to do that?
I have a website. That's my name, www.jamesckaufman.com. Plus, I have a website at UConn. But in general, if you just Google me, you'll find a bunch of the books. And The Creativity Advantage is my most recent, along with another one on creativity in theater, which is, got to cheat to get the subtitle right, Lessons in Creativity from Musical Theater Characters, which I did with Dana Rowe. And yeah, I think if this stuff's interesting, I'm hoping you would enjoy those.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I'm gonna have to check some of those out. So yeah, I want to thank you again and thank the viewers as well. So until next time.
But thank you. Thank you for having me.